We are now in 2026. Happy New Year, everybody. Akemashite omedetou gozaimasu. In previous year, I used to post on my website a summary of my progress with Japanese learning and especially the kind of content that I consumed over the year and kind of see a retrospective of what I did in the past year and what I plan to do in the following year. And it's kind of become a tradition for me to the point where this year I decided to do something different, and last year I started this new YouTube channel, so I thought why not just do the same thing but do it in video form as well. This video is going to be a bit long. You can skip ahead towards the conclusion if you don't care too much about the individual breakdown sections, but I think it can be interesting for everybody. And if you prefer to read a written form of mostly the same content, then I have a link below on my website that you can read. So first of all, as you can see from this post from my website, last year I closed with the thoughts that I would try to reduce the amount of time I spent on Japanese. Like in the previous years, I spent about 1700 hours on average per year on Japanese content. And I'm talking about content consumptions like anime, manga, games, novels, and all that stuff. And I thought it was a bit too much and I wanted to reduce the number. So I gave myself a kind of like soft challenge of trying to keep it to 1200 hours total, and then spend the rest of the time doing things that are more productive for me, like work on other projects, work on other hobbies, and even consume some English content. So here we are. It's been a year since then. What happened? Did I do it? Did I not do it? Did I manage to stick to 1200 hours? Well, the answer to that is this. That's how many hours I spent in 2025 on Japanese. As you can see, it's around the time that I thought I would limit myself to. So in one way, I would say I successfully managed to stick to my goal, but at the same time, I kind of went overboard for like 50 hours. And I think the main reason for that is that I was gifted Octopath Traveler 0 as a game on Christmas, and I was perfectly on track to stay under my goal. And then I started playing Octopath Traveler 0 and it's too good. I'm enjoying it too much. So I just ended up like blowing away all my budget, but it's fine. I think overall I showed that I have been disciplined enough to mostly stick to my goal. So yeah, but let's look more into the graph itself. So you can see here the amount of time I spent for each month on Japanese content. And if you want a more detailed breakdown, there's this graph as well, which shows which type of content I consumed for each month, but it's kind of hard to read anyway. But the point is that I feel like I've been mostly consistent throughout the year. The spikes that I've had in content were mostly in the month of August, where I did a reading challenge where I challenged myself to read as many books as I could. And for that month, you can see that actually my reading time for light novels went up. I read 4 books that month. In July, I also did a manga reading challenge, which was fun, but it didn't really impact much the amount of time I read because I mostly stuck to a regular schedule. As for the rest of the year, as usual, towards the beginning of the year, I feel like I spend more time playing video games and reading manga, and then as the year progresses, I focus more on novels and visual novels for some reason. I don't really understand why. I've been doing that consistently for the last 2 or 3 years for some reason, and it's not something I'm planning, it's just something that I've noticed happens. Another thing is that towards the month of July, I ended up buying a Nintendo Switch 2, and I kind of got into collecting or like generally playing visual novels on Switch, and my visual novel time started to go up again. And in the future, I'm planning to collect more and more visual novels, specifically on Switch. Why on Switch? I don't really know. You can see here all my Switch games, and most of them are visual novels or JRPGs. So as I mentioned, I was doing this challenge where I tried to stick to less time on Japanese and more time on working on extra projects. What did I achieve in 2025 for that? Well, I think there's been 2 major things that I'm pretty happy about. The first one is the Yokubi grammar guide, and that I've had such a positive feedback from the community. I'm so thankful. I'm so happy to hear that you guys like it as much as I do. And for people who don't know, it's a rewrite of a Sakubi grammar guide that I thought had some mistakes, some problems, and some things that I could work better. So I rewrote it with better explanations and a more palatable format, and I've released it to the community, and I'm still actively working on it. And so far the feedback has been amazing, and I'm really happy to hear that. For the future, there's still a lot to be done. I would like to see better explanations and reward a few examples, and there's a few pages that are still missing that I plan to work on, and I plan to expand it further, but that's a topic for another time. On top of that, another project that I've been working on is this YouTube channel, and I started doing this YouTube channel as a way to kind of like, I want to improve my ability to do public speaking and also edit videos. I'm really bad, as you can see from this video and other videos in my channel. I'm still really bad at editing videos, and I'm very lazy. But I'm kind of working on a new skill, and I want to improve on that front as well. As far as things that changed between last year and this year, the major thing is that at the end of last year, we bought a house towards more of the countryside in Japan. It's not too far from Tokyo, to be honest, but it's not really like big city, but it's not fully countryside. And this has given me a chance to actually interact more with the local community, and we live close to my wife's parents, so we spend some time with them and the family and use Japanese every day. And my kid is growing up, and he's been going to daycare, and we have to interact with the local families, like the local neighborhood, the daycare and teachers at the daycare. And it's been a really amazing experience. I'm so happy, and I really feel like the community here is really nice to be in, and I'm very happy of this change. I did not enjoy living in a huge city like Tokyo. I mean, I do like Tokyo a lot, but it's not the place where I want to raise a family. But yeah, this has given me a chance to do more output and use Japanese not only for content consumption, but actually actively work and talk to people every day. So that's been a great opportunity for me. I still wish I did more, and there's still a lot of more to do, but I can say that it's been going pretty well. So I want to go into more details on each individual content type that I consume, which would be video games, visual novels, light novels, and manga. Anime, I did watch a bit of anime, but I don't have anything interesting to say. Has been mostly in the back burner. I watch a couple of episodes every few days during lunch break or something, and there's nothing really fancy to talk about that much. But for other things like games, novels, and manga, I do talk a bit more about some of the things that I enjoy the most in 2025. So if you are interested into those, I have them timestamped in this video, and the video is already quite long. So if you do care, you can watch it, but if it's too long, then I recommend you skip ahead to this timestamp, which will take you exactly at the end of this video, where I will be talking about my prospects of the next upcoming year and what I plan to work on in the next year. Okay, so in 2025, I played quite a bit of video games in Japanese. I ended up completing 14 of them, and I'll be talking about some of them, not all of them, because there's way too many to go through. I'm gonna talk about some of the gems that stood out to me in particular, and no, we are not talking about you. You had your chance, everybody's talking about you. You can sit back. As I was saying, Japanese games. So I started the year playing Fantasia Neo Dimension, a classic JRPG that came out on iOS first, and finally a couple of years ago Mistwalker decided to release it to all platforms, and I strongly recommend you play the new version. The difficulty is very hard, and in the new version they ended up reducing the difficulty quite a bit, and I think it was quite worth it. It recalls the old school Final Fantasy style of dungeon exploration and battle system. The combat is very unique because every boss fight is very targeted to a certain set of mechanics or chain of attacks that are fairly tricky. It's been a while since I had such an enjoyable combat system compared to a lot of other turn-based JRPGs, and in particular I felt that every boss fight I almost lost until I managed to barely scrape by and use all the tools available to get through it, and I think it really shows that the game is really well designed and really enjoyed it. The story is okay, it's nothing too special. It's a fairly standard story. It's quite linear in the beginning, and then it opens up towards the end. You can kind of split the game into two halves, where the first half is much more traditional, and then the second half is more like end game content, where you go through all these different areas and you visit all these places, and it's a pretty enjoyable game. And the second entry from the same company is Lost Odyssey. This game has quite a cult behind it because it's been locked behind the Xbox console for a long time, and the only way to play it reasonably is if you get your hands on any Xbox system, which, let's be honest, nobody plays. There are ways you can emulate it, but it doesn't really work very well, in my opinion, in my experience. So I ended up actually buying an old Xbox console just to play this, and I have to say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't really good. But in particular, I thought the story was interesting. The characters were kind of interesting, but the voice acting was really bad. And the acting in general, I think they tried to do something different in the way they direct the cutscenes, where the dialogue was fun, was enjoyable, but the direction was really weird. Weird camera angles, weird characters cutting each other off when they're speaking. There's a lot of dialogues in the background that is not subtitles because it's kind of like banter between side characters, but it really stands out to me. The combat is very slow. I enjoy the combat once you get into it, it's really enjoyable, and once you have specific builds, especially towards the end game, you can make some really broken stuff. But for the most part, it's really slow. If you play Final Fantasy IX, it's kind of the type of slow where every action you take takes like a ton of time. You fight enemies in the dungeons and they take so much time to just load, and it's very slow. I really wish they remade it with better graphics, better direction, and better combat, like reworked combat system that is modernized. But otherwise, it's a solid game. One other game that really stood out to me was Dragon Quest III HD Remake. I've never been a huge fan of the Dragon Quest series. I played quite a lot of them actually. I played some of the MMOs as well, like the Dragon Quest X. I played 11. I really didn't like it as much. But this one really, I felt like I finally got it. I finally understood why people like Dragon Quest so much. It's very old school style. It's a remake of the old game from like the early 90s or late 80s or something on the NES. And wow. What a game. Like, the story is fairly light, but it's fairly like it's still there, and you can kind of follow a path, and it's very open-ended where you kind of explore the world at your own pace. Once you get through the initial part of the game, you can kind of explore the quest, and you get to visit different areas at your own pace, and it's very, very open. It really brought me back to a time when I was like a kid playing a lot of, especially Western RPGs, very old DOS RPGs. Like I remember like Magic Candle series or some other of those games where you just build your own party and you just go explore, and I really enjoyed so much. Even the story was actually pretty good, and I'm looking forward to playing the Dragon Quest 1 and 2 remake, which despite the number are supposed to be sequels, so that's one thing to look forward to next year. And then Trails in the Sky remake. I'm a huge Trails fan. I spent the entire 2023 going through the entire Trails series in Japanese, and Trails in the Sky, the first chapter in particular, I played a long time ago in English, and I never had the chance to actually play it in Japanese. And playing the remake in Japanese was a treat. I think it's my favorite game of 2025, if we don't count Expedition 33, of course. It's a very nice reinterpretation of the original, and for fans of the original, you will recognize a lot of the areas of the game that are really the same. Like the script is the same, it's almost entirely the same. They reworked everything in 3D, they made the combat much more enjoyable. Honestly, it's one of the best remakes I've ever played. Language-wise as well, it's not as hard as some of the later Trails entries. It's less politics and more slice of life, Inaka kind of stuff. I strongly recommend it. If you want to get into a long-lasting experience with JRPGs, and especially if you want to do this for the purpose of learning Japanese, I strongly recommend this game. It's a great starting point. And the last game on my list was actually quite a surprise. I played towards the end of the year, and it was Ghost of Tsushima. Usually I don't play English games in Japanese because I prefer to play them in the original language, but Ghost of Tsushima really surprised me. And wow, the translation, the localization into Japanese is top-notch. You would never imagine it was not a Japanese game. And honestly, it's probably one of the games with the hardest language I've ever played in Japanese, as in there's a lot of archaic Japanese, there's a lot of really specific names and kanji, and lots of family names, locations. It's very hard to follow if you're not good with the Japanese. And I played other hard games in the past, like Elden Ring or Final Fantasy 16, like language-wise hard. But Ghost of Tsushima kind of tops all of them, I think. And wow, the main story I didn't particularly care too much, but the side quests, some of the characters, like Masako Dono was like such a great character. Like there's a lot of like personal relationship between the character and the honor system and samurai and all that stuff. And if you don't get the full picture in Japanese, you kind of are going to miss a lot of interesting points. But the entire arc, like the entire story, revolves around the way all these characters interact with the cruel world that they're living in, and how they come to terms with their honor system, like the samurai code, and meanwhile fighting barbarians invading their land, and deciding whether they should surrender or they should resist and rebel. It's a really amazing story. I'm really looking forward to playing Ghost of Yotei maybe next year if I get the chance. But yeah, these are my main games of the year, and it's been a very fruitful year, and I'm really looking forward to next year in gaming as well. I specifically decided to keep the visual novel part of my tracking separate from games, because I play a lot of games and I've never been a huge visual novel kind of guy. But the last few years, I actually started building a collection of visual novels that I know kind of interest me. I'm not really into the slice of life romance stuff or harem or dating simulator. I don't like that stuff much. I want to get like a really nice adventure type of story. The more nitpicky I got with my tastes, the more I started exploring the genre. And this year I felt like I made some pretty good progress. I played a total of 5 visual novels, and a few of them were actually quite long, and I won't go through all of them, but my main 3 that I played were Senmomo, Cyanotype, and Iwakura Aria. Let me start with Senmomo. Senmomo was really a surprise to me. I know it was from the same developer as Yustia, which is one of my favorite visual novels from the past. I think it's my first visual novel I played in Japanese, and I strongly recommend it. It's consistently at the top of the recommendation chart for a lot of people because it's a very good visual novel, but I never heard much people talking about Senmomo. And Senmomo is very similar in vibes, but it's a very different scenario and environment, and the pacing is also very different. So Senmomo is a story about kind of like alternative history, where the story takes place in Japan, but it's not really Japan. It's like this empire, and they got invaded by this republic, which it kind of feels like it's the United States basically. And back in the past, this Japan, like the empire, using magic, they protected themselves from the outside. But eventually the republic managed to break through this barrier and won the war against the empire, and now the empire is subjugated by this enemy force. And it's been a few years since this war, and the empress has been killed, and her daughter, the new empress, has been taken hostage. And you are one guy who is a descendant of a family of warriors, protector of the empress, and you're part of a rebellion group trying to rebel against the invading forces. And so most of the story takes place underground, where they're trying to make plans on how to do rescue missions and how to save the empress. But it turns out the empress is actually not the empress, and the real empress has run away, and she comes back, and there's a bunch of stuff happening, and eventually realize that things are not as clear as you thought they were. It's very long, but the interesting part is that not only you have to deal with the underground rebelling kind of story, but also there's quite a bit of not slice of life, but like the characters are going to school, and they're doing like some academy kind of training, and they all have their own lives in the normal world, and they end up interacting with other characters from the like opposition, like from the republic, and some of them are not as bad as you thought they were, and they're kind of like this relationship that end up building. It's very interesting angle, I thought. And there's like a romance between the 2 main characters. I only did the main route. I don't care about doing romance between side characters. I just want the main story, and it's actually really well written. It's not obvious, and it's very like, if you're into the heartwarming kind of romance with a bit of like drama, it's really nice. I really enjoyed it. And now we move on to Cyanotype. Cyanotype actually was much longer than I expected. It took me like 60 hours to read through all of it. It's a fairly interesting and a bit controversial to me as a visual novel. When you go into it, there's basically 3 main stories from 3 almost separate characters, and they are very different from each other. So one story is about a student who doesn't want to go to school and instead wants to become a photographer and wants to take pictures to honor his dead mother. And he meets a teacher who tries to convince him to go back to school, and things happen. The other story is kind of like alternative take on Shakespeare. You are Shakespeare, and you have to write these plays, and you see how the British world was at the time, and there's a bunch of drama happening. It's fairly neutral, but it's also interesting. And then the third story, which left me very unhappy, let's put it this way, it's a story about this failure of a teacher, like 40-year-old guy who is an aspiring writer, and he is really not a happy person. His wife is cheating on him, and he's depressed. He struggles with the fact that he cannot become as good as a writer as his friends from university who became a famous writer and then died by suicide. And he falls in love with one of these students, and it is really creepy. I don't like the fact that you are a 40-year-old guy preying on a 16-year-old student. I had to read through it because I wanted to read through the entire visual novel, but really I didn't like it. The English translation actually changed the age of the character to make her a university student, which tells you exactly how bad the story is. That story actually ruined the visual novel for me quite a bit. Anyway, once you go through all these 3 stories, you get to the actual main story, and that one was actually really good. I really enjoyed it. It was quite a ride. If you can get past that really creepy side story, the rest is pretty decent. And then the last visual novel of the year that I played, and to me was the hidden highlight of the year, is Iwakura Aria. Iwakura Aria is this Yuri, very light Yuri VN, where it starts off as this kind of like horror thriller story where you are this orphan and she lives in this orphanage, and one day she gets picked up by this rich guy who hires her to become a maid, this like huge villa mansion. The story takes place in the 60s in Japan, but the vibes are very European Renaissance kind of style, and she works as a maid for this guy and his daughter who is about the same age, and there are some weird creepy secrets happening, and slowly you explore this mansion, you familiarize with the characters, and you get to know what's actually going on in this family. It's very like artistic oriented kind of novel. Like the main character, she likes to draw and she has like a sketchbook and she draws around, and it has a very unique style. If you played Fata Morgana, it's very reminiscent of that style. It starts off as like, you get the vibe it's gonna be like a thriller, horror, maybe like murder kind of story, but in reality it was more like a psychological thing. I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't say too much, but you slowly get to know all the characters and you find out that they all have really interesting motives and reason for behaving the way they are. And while there are clear bad and good guys, you never get the certainty that what is going on is actually what is happening, and a lot of it comes through the eyes of the main character who doesn't know what's going on, and she can only trust what she is being told and what happens as she explores this mansion. It was really well written. It's fairly short, like took me 26 hours, but it's really well written. And the romance starts off as very platonic. Depending on the ending you get, there's a bunch of different endings, you can get different results, but I strongly recommend it. It became probably one of my favorite visual novels of all time, surprisingly. It's a fairly minor visual novel, to be honest, but for me I really enjoyed it quite a lot. I read a total of 12 novels in 2025, and here are some of my highlights or favorites of the year. I started the year finishing the Seikai no Monsho series, which is an old school sci-fi series. I started it late last year and I finished the last couple of books early this year, and the series is very interesting. There is a follow-up series after this one, which is like much longer, but this is just a trilogy that gives you like the foundations of the series. I think it's very interesting. It's kind of old school sci-fi, and it's based mostly on the very hard sci-fi. There's a lot of descriptions of technical workings of the spaceships, how the space travel works, how the alien races work and everything, and all the politics around that. It's very complicated and very detailed. The author even created an entire new language, like new alien language, and a lot of the conversations, dialogues and words in the book are subtitled with furigana in this weird katakana language, which is complete nonsense. And that part, if you're the kind of person who reads all the furigana notes and everything, you are going to have a field trip on this one. And then the next series, we move on to the Hikari no O series. It's 5 books, one of them being like a guide and like an extra story after the main story ends. And I'm kind of torn on this series. There was an anime as well, which aired a few years ago, and the anime was really mediocre, like low quality, low budget. Overall it was interesting, but towards the end they started using AI art for some stuff. It's not something that I would recommend, but the series itself is interesting. It has a lot of interesting world building. It's kind of like this fantasy post-apocalyptic world where natural fire has become this dangerous thing for people, where any living being that approaches the fire spontaneously combusts, and for this reason humans have started to survive using alternative ways to get heat and energy. And this comes from hunting these weird monsters that live in the forest outside of the cities, using special tools that are only used by these fire hunters, Hikari, written like this. And it's a very interesting story. If you want some kind of dark fantasy, I strongly recommend this series. And it's not isekai, which is great, but at the same time the writing is a bit messy. I think the author has a lot of interesting ideas, but the sequences of the narration are very confusing, and I thought, hey, maybe it's my reading, like maybe the Japanese is too complicated for me and I kind of like cannot follow what is going on. But even after watching the anime, which focuses on the same events, I was left a bit confused. There are some choices that are very questionable, and one of the 4 books feels almost irrelevant because almost nothing happens in it. And by the end of the book, the characters end up being in the same position as they were in the beginning, which feels like a slap in the face of the reader. But to be fair, I still enjoyed it quite a bit, so I recommend it if you start for some dark fantasy series in Japanese. And then the next one is Aromajo ga Shinumade, and this is a very nice story. It's like 4 books. And they had recently an anime as well, which is what got me into reading the series. And the anime is also really well done, but I strongly recommend reading the books. They're very short, and it's this like slice of life kind of story where this trainee witch, she's like 17, on the day of her birthday, her teacher tells her that she will die in 1 year. And before she dies, she has to collect 1,000 happiness tears, like tears of happiness from people she helps. And if she can collect 1,000 of them, she can create this magic that allows her to break the curse. And the story sounds dark, and it kind of gets dark the farther you go, but it's presented in a very light-hearted, slice-of-life way. The first book is very episodic, like every chapter has like individual stories to introduce new characters and the world. And slowly, eventually, you kind of build the thread of a story. And the ending was really, really interesting to me. I thought I knew where the story was going, and I was very wrong. The third book is a bit slow, but kind of like build some foundations, and the fourth book is really nice. I strongly recommend the series, especially if you want to get into reading. It's still pretty simple in language, but it's not like a basic isekai slop kind of simple stuff. It's a bit more involved, and I strongly recommend this series. And the last one that I want to talk about is Reinde Kokumonogatari, and this is a more like high fantasy story. Like I wouldn't classify this as a light novel, it's more of a serious book, and it's a bit longer as well. And the Reinde Kokumonogatari series has like, I think it's 4 or 5 books, but from what I've seen, they're almost all independent in the story. They take place in the same universe, in the same chronology of the events, but they're like different stories and standalone characters and situations. It's a very high fantasy. If you are used to like Western type of fantasy, it's kind of similar. The first one builds the foundation of the story, which ends up being expanded more into the other books, but I've only read the first one, so I cannot speak only about that one. And if you read the synopsis, it sounds kind of boring, but it's actually much deeper than it seems. The story is about this girl, Yuria, and she is the daughter of a famous hero, and he wants to build a trade route between this unexplored country called Reinde, and it's like an isolated area in the middle of the mountains, and humans don't want to go into this place because it's dangerous, and there are some settlements and some areas, and he wants to build a trade route between his country and this new like unexplored area. And he hires a guide called Tristan to help him navigate this place. And there's basically some weird magic and stuff happening. There's like this like sickness that infects people. And if you look at it on the surface, it's mostly just like people traveling this land, trying to find a nice geographical place to build a route. It's very methodical. It's not like an adventure. It's more like just, oh, this area is a bit too rough. There's too many rocks. This part is like, we can build a tunnel here. There's like too many trees here. But deep down, it slowly builds the relationship between the characters, and especially there is a love story between Yuria and Tristan and stuff happening in the background. It sounds boring at first, but trust me, I really enjoyed the characters, the characterization, and the ending especially was very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the books in the series, although it's gonna take a while because I have way more stuff in my backlog. These were like my main 4 books, and now I'm back on reading the Spice and Wolf series. I think last year I left off on book number 8, and now I'm reading book number 9, but that's a story for next year, I guess. I read a total of 55 manga volumes, and while I will not go into details on all of them, there's a couple of series that I want to talk about specifically. I think this year for manga, I didn't read as much as I wanted to, and most of my reading in manga was in July. I made like a challenge to myself, and I said I would read 1 manga volume per day, so 31 manga volume in just 1 month. I talk a bit in my other video about this, but basically, yeah, it went pretty well. But here are some of my highlights. The first highlight is the series Majoto Yohei, which is a fantasy story, not isekai, fortunately, about this mercenary who gets hired to kill a witch, and this witch who is very like cold-hearted, and she kills a lot of people. And this mercenary is the only one who survives her attack, and when he's about to kill her, basically they strike a deal where she hires him to protect her, and they escape from the main continent they were living in, and they move to an unknown continent. And in this continent, people use magic. And this is the main part, because she's a witch and she can use magic, but he is a mercenary and he doesn't have any magic at all. And magic in his home continent was seen as like a negative thing. And they move into this new continent where people have magic. There's like monsters and stuff. And so they kind of like make a living there, and she becomes an adventurer and he's kind of like protecting her. And he's like super strong, but he doesn't have any magic. So he has to deal with his own deficiencies in skills. And it kind of builds up on that. And there's lots of nice characters and the story is fairly light to read. I think we're up to like 7 volumes right now, and it's pretty fun. Another series that stood out to me is Eryo to Denki Ningyo. So this series, I really like it, especially for the art. I think it's only 3 volumes. That's the ones I read. And it takes place in this kind of like post-apocalyptic world, not Earth, but similar, where society isn't allowed to use electricity anymore because after the rising of AI robots, humans realize that AI is too dangerous and they want to contain it and they want to contain technology. And we see the story from the perspective of this girl, this main character, who has this weird superpower where she can generate electricity, and she lives with her guardian, who used to be one of like murder robots that fought in the war or something, but she now is changed and her role is to protect this girl. And they go on an adventure. They leave their hometown and they start like exploring the world and interacting with people all over the world, and then the story builds up. And it's very nicely written. It's kind of like Yuri, because the 2 main characters are girls and they kind of have this love story, but mostly it's about relationship with the characters and figuring out what's actually going on in the world. All this like politics and intrigues, and in every village they go there's like different things happening. And then another really good one that I read is Asadora, from the same author as 20th Century Boys and Monster. And wow, that's a really, really good manga. It's still ongoing and I'm really waiting for the new volumes to come out, but I binge read that like so quickly. I really devoured it. The story is about Asadora, which is a little girl who for some reason she ends up piloting a plane during some kind of like thunderstorm that ends up wiping out her hometown. And during this event she sees this giant monster like a kaiju, like Godzilla kind of stuff, but nobody believes her. We see her grow through the years, like it's like 20-30 years later, and there's some intrigue, there's stuff happening, and I don't want to spoil everything, but anyway, it's a very interesting series. I really enjoyed it. And the last one that I want to talk about, it's Tsui no Taimashi. This manga series is borderline between slop and really good writing for some reason. Like I don't know how to place it, because I started reading it thinking it was really slop. Like they had like some free volumes online that I read, and I was like, this looks iffy, but I got really into it and I really, really enjoy it. For me, this author has a way of depicting especially fight scenes, but the dynamism of animations. Well, I say animation is a manga, but you can feel the flow between each panels. I'm gonna show an example here. Like I don't know how to explain it, but I read a lot of manga, and especially a lot of shonen manga or like fight manga. There's people fighting and it's always a chaos to figure out who is doing what is happening, and how does the combat flow with one panel to the other. And this manga is a treat. Like the author is really, really amazing at showing how things flow, and there's gonna be like lines of drawing flowing through the page. You have to read it. It's really great. The story is weird. It's your typical kind of like not quite shonen, because it's very dark. There's a lot of gore and a lot of like violence, but at the same time it's not really deep. There's like people have like some superpowers. It's like combat arts and kung fu and fighting style, and there's a lot of like guns and things, and secret society of magicians and people with curses and stuff, and they kind of fight each other and kill each other. That's basically the gist of it. But I really, really enjoyed it. I devoured it. I can read a volume in like 20 minutes. It's like so good. There are a lot of exciting things that I have planned for 2026, but at the same time, I decided that I don't want to tell myself what to do on a strict schedule, and especially I don't need to put myself into buckets or barriers to stop myself from consuming more and more content that I'm interested in. So I think the challenge in 2025 to limit my amount of hours in Japanese was fairly successful and fairly interesting. It gave me a nice perspective on the things that I can do and the things that I actually want to do. Because when you are more limited on time, I feel like you tend to prioritize things better and in a more structured way. And that tells you something about who you really are as a person. And at the same time, I know that the project that I started, and also there's a couple of projects that are kind of secret that I don't want to talk about too much yet. I cannot announce them yet because they don't depend on me, they depend on external factors. But at the same time, I know there are things that I want to do, and regardless of it being in Japanese or not, I am not afraid anymore to, let's say, put Japanese on the back burner to work on other stuff. And that's something that I think is very valuable for me. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not going to give myself blockers or barriers for 2026, but we'll see how things goes. I do have a pretty healthy backlog of especially video games. There's a couple of book series that I want to read still. I need to finish the Rendekoku Monogatari series. There's I think 3 or 4 more books that I want to go through. There's a couple of visual novels that I kind of left halfway through, like the Leyline visual novel that I only read the first one out of 4. They're fairly short, so probably I'll try to get through them. But at the same time, I think my main focus is going to be video games again. I recently got into kind of retro gaming. I bought an old Dreamcast console, and I have a bunch of games for Dreamcast that I really want to get through, and those are probably going to be my priority, at least at the beginning of the year. Right now I'm going through Octopath Traveler 0, which is a really long game from what I heard. I'm about 40-50 hours in, and I think it's at least 100 hours to go through, so that's going to take me a few more weeks to clear that. And on top of that, I would really like to stick to more regular schedule for streaming, but it's kind of hard to stream with a family and not having exactly a regular schedule yet. Hopefully in 2026 I will work more on trying to build a regular schedule, but specifically I want to do more YouTube videos and more YouTube editing. So I will try to get at least 1 video a month, if not more. But if you have any interesting ideas about videos or topics that you want to hear me talk about, then please post some comments below. I would be very happy. I think one thing that I want to talk about is my experience buying a house in Japan, which I think is fairly interesting topic. And there's a bunch of other topics that I kind of want to touch on that I think might be interesting, but I cannot make any promises yet. Another thing is, as I mentioned in the beginning, my Yokobi grammar guide has been going really well, and I'm very happy to hear that people like it. But at the same time, I feel like there's still a lot to be worked on and a lot that I want to fix. So that's going to take some priority. I need to finish the extra content, and there's extra sections that I have planned that I'm going to write, but I haven't just had the time yet to do that. So for 2026, look forward to that as well. I think this video already has gotten way too long, and I'm really sorry if you guys are stuck here with me, and I appreciate you getting to the end of this video, whether or not you have skipped the previous sections, which I totally understand. It's very long. Here's the cheers of Coke Zero to go with our next challenges for 2026 and new immersion for Japanese and more. This is not sponsored. I just like Coke Zero. じゃあ皆さん、今年もよろしくお願いします。